Good.
All right, so 8:04, we'll call the meeting to order. Thanks everyone for making it today. And turn it over to Brittany.
All right. Good morning, everyone. It's nice to see you all in person. I distributed my executive director's report. A few things I want to touch on before we introduce Jenna. Some highlights from this past month. We are going through our audit right now. Typically at this meeting, we would have our audit presentation. But because of COVID-19, we've gotten an extension. I believe it was a 30-day extension, which is kind of a blessing in disguise because there was a lot of new processes that we're trying to implement. And this is my first audit, so I'm learning a lot, and it's been a crazy summer. So she will be at our next meeting to present, and then we'll plan to submit our audit to the ABO that first week in September. We're still working on the Lions Sale property. We'll get into our agenda a little bit later, but I do want to mention that the town has put a $5.6 million assessment on the property, which is not conducive for trying to resell the property to a private business owner. So we've been working with Kevin to challenge that process, just going through the legal process to do that. I will mention that this week is the Census Blitz Week for the county. So we've been really working to push our communities to fill out the census. It's been going really well. Jenna created a whole marketing plan, social media campaign for the Census Week. So we had a big role in that. And then last but not least, I would like to introduce our new economic development specialist, Jenna Kreger. This is her third week here. Yeah, week 3. And she has really just taken the ball and ran with it. She's been already a great asset to this organization. She's going to do great things with Naturally Lewis and assisting with business development initiatives. So I'm certainly very pleased with everything that she's done so far, and I'm really excited for everything that she will do. So I wanted to give her the opportunity to kind of introduce herself and give you guys some background on where she's been and her experience. Go ahead.
So I think I met most of you by now, but thank you for having me. It's a long process to get here, but I'm so glad it turned out this way, so thank you. I am from Lewis County originally. I grew up in Constableville on Dairy Farm. My parents had a small business in Glenfield, and my siblings all have small businesses as well, so that's near and dear to my heart. I went away to Casanova College to study business management and marketing. After that, I moved up to Clayton, New York, and reconnected with Doreen Garrett, who I grew up with her daughter. She's the owner of, or now is on the board for Otis Technology. I was the marketing and events coordinator for St. Lawrence Spirits, the distillery up there, for 3 years before I moved to Rochester and immersed myself in the association world in construction and technology there. So I'm familiar with the board setting. I I was involved in about 5 different boards there, running different associations on a daily basis. So I'm happy to be home, get to play with my nephews on a nightly basis, which is awesome. I am very excited to get going on some of these projects that Brittany and I have been talking about. I'm learning a lot, which is great. Excited to get out into the community once it's safe and able to do so. Few projects I'm working on right now. Brittany mentioned the census. We're going to really hit the ground running with some small business spotlights, social media, and lots more to come. So thank you again for having me.
Welcome.
Thank you.
So this means we just hand everything over.
We're on the same page.
Yeah.
I'm excited about it. any ideas I'm very open to, so keep them coming.
She, in her background, so she worked for the Builders Exchange in Rochester and has experience working within the construction and technology and has big interest in workforce development and did a lot in workforce development down there. So I think that's another facet that will just kind of place her into some of these workforce committees and kind of let her take the ball running with that part of economic development. So really excited.
Excellent.
And that's all.
Did you wanna do the budget letter now?
Yeah, yep. So correspondence that we received, I provided you with a letter from Ryan Pichet, County Manager, just requesting, us to provide a letter to request funds in the 2021 county budget. And I also provided, our letter that we submitted, to request the same amount that we received this year. So stay tuned. I know the county is working on their budgeting starting that next month, I believe.
All right, thank you. So, committee reports and Tom had a little, demonstration for us, before he gets into his finance committee report.
Good morning, everyone, and it's really good to see everyone in person. Joe has talked on several occasions about land use and the importance of trying to use our natural resources wisely and so on. And so for just a second, I'd like to put on my ag teacher hat and give you a little demonstration. Now, if this sheet of paper were to represent the entire surface of the world, if we fold the sheet of paper into quarters, 3/4 of the Earth's surface is covered either with water or ice. So we've got this much land left. Of this much land, if you get rid of all the mountains and deserts that are not habitable, you end up with about a business card of habitable land in the world. If you take out all the cities and towns and roads, you end up with this much land to grow crops for the world's food supply. So that's a little demonstration that I've done when I was back as an ag teacher. And I think it points out that we need to be very wise in our use of our land because we don't have a lot of it. And good land is pretty valuable stuff, really. So despite that demonstration, I'm still very much in favor of doing solar and wind power because I think green power is very, very important to our survival too. But I think that demonstrates that what Joe's been saying on several occasions is very correct. So with that said, I'll move into my finance committee report. Finance committee met by Zoom on July 23rd, and I will just try to give you an overview of what we did, and we can discuss things in more depth as we get to them. In attendance were 2 people from the brewing company. They talked in depth about what their plans were for the future and the fact that they have caught up with their finances so that they don't really owe us anything at this point in time. So that was quite a presentation that they gave us on some of their ideas for expansion and possible loans and so on in the future. We reviewed the financial reports, nothing out of the ordinary there. We did question a few things, but everything looks to be in pretty good shape as far as that goes. I believe in your packets you have some information on a consulting firm. We spent quite a bit of time discussing that and really didn't come to any conclusions, but that we should be discussing it here at the board meeting. We discussed some of the UTEP solar revisions, which maybe prompted me to give you the demonstration I did. And again, those are ongoing talks. We covered Duke Energy's, that's a continuing negotiation with the pilot there. And talked a little bit about the audit. And if there's any questions on any of it, I'd attempt to answer them, but probably we'd be more efficient if we discuss them as we go through things, so.
And thank you, Tom. Yeah, most of this stuff is in the packet, and I think we will get into several of these items in more detail, so thank you for that. So moving on to items for approval. We'll start with the packet Brittany sent out on Friday, including minutes from the July 2nd virtual meeting. Were there any, did everyone get a chance to review those?
Yeah, so I move.
Jerry moves to approval, do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. The June financial report was also included in the packet.
Yep, a few things to take a look at. If we start with our balance sheet, our accounts receivable is up due to an IDA fee for the US Light Touring project of $54,000. That was, I believe, signed, I almost believe it was last year, and for some reason, we just received their fee for that. So we were up for that in June, and then other current assets are down due to back payments from Snow Ridge and Skewed. Snow Ridge back paid $11,000, Skewed back paid $5,000. And then moving on to our profit and loss, the pilot pass-through line, we budgeted that the Otis payments for June would come in June, but they ended up paying early in May. So that's why that looks high in the budget. And then I will say that our agency expenses are up from budgeted, mostly from a legal bill. McCardle's office, they bill us every 3 to 4 months, I believe. So that was up a little bit from what we had budgeted. But overall, we underspent in June based upon our budget. Any questions?
Just a couple comments, just to bring this board up to speed on the county side of the aisle. We planned on, at the September committee meetings, trying to come out with a supporting resolution to support your UTEP, which you're going to pass, I believe, at your September meeting.
Hoping so, yes.
Then from there, there were 3 stages of it, and I can't remember exactly what the next one was, but there is one on land use. So we expect some resistance on that from some of the legislators is a pushback against telling farmers what they can do with their land under that thesis at least. So my thought would be to incorporate Tom's presentation into, we're gonna probably ask someone from the IDA, you or Jenna or both, to come in support of the land use, and I think that would be an excellent thing to incorporate into the logic of why the county and the IDA need to control land use as a bigger picture rather than just the town. So just to give you a heads up on that, and we are still trying to figure out how to work in the community fund into a packet. So we did meet Tuesday before the board meeting. You weren't able to be there, but Cassie was there, Joan was there, and Ron. So we are trying to move that forward.
Okay, and we'll get into that at the end of our agenda too, just
Okay.
where we've been.
Sorry,
Yeah.
didn't
No,
mean to
that's
be
fine.
out of place.
All right, thank you. So anything else on the budget? So, and again, the letter was submitted and received by the county requesting a level of funding, I think equal to last year or this current year, correct?
Yeah, about 180,000.
Yeah, so we realize there's a lot of financial strains out there right now. And so that'll be another consideration as we move forward and are, kind of showing the results of what we've been able to do and what the impact of that is. And even though there's less money to spend, it's a valuable spend for the return on the investment. So with that, I just wanted to note that thinking of budget issues going forward and keeping our eyes on that. But so now we'll move on and take a motion to approve the June financials if there's no questions.
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, the next thing was a loan report for the second quarter.
Yep, so we submit these on a quarterly basis, just overview of all of our notes receivable. Currently, everyone is up to speed on their payments, so that's good news. Any questions on those?
So, and I might have missed it when you were doing the financial report, so Barkeeter is current?
Barkeeter, we need to write off today. That's actually an approval, a motion that we need to make today. We've kept Barkeeter on there because we haven't formally made that motion to write off that loan.
Is that the where
That is the revolving loan fund that he took out when he first opened the tap room. So he bought some equipment with it. That's the equipment that we're trying to, Kevin's working on the bill of sale to acquire back, to resell, and put that money towards, if we can sell it, towards this amount. This is from our auditor. We want to still write off that loan because we may or may not be able to sell that equipment. And if we do sell it and we receive some funds to put back towards that loan fund, I think it's just a recapture of bad debt. That's how it will be.
So writing it off now, is it from the direction of the auditor, and
Yes.
it won't have a bearing on us acquiring the equipment and trying to resell it?
Nope. And this is as of the end of June. This loan report is as of the end of June. So at that point, Barkeeter has been on our financials for a few years, and we just need to get them off our books.
Have we exhausted all legal options to receive this payment? Because I
So
think it's
there's,
a credibility issue, especially at a time where Joe's point about just expenses in general during COVID. We got a budget, we got a letter to the county manager. I don't know, I think this puts us at some risk by writing it off from a political perspective.
I think we have exhausted, I mean, what Kevin's working on right now, the bill of sale to acquire the equipment, I think that's our last option that we have to acquire and then resell. We do have an interested party in the equipment.
I can just say there are actually two debts.
Yes.
There's a personal debt that Gene Richards owes us, and we have a confession of judgment with respect to that. And he is not making his payments on that, so this is really only, each debt's about the same, about $10,000, a little more than $10,000. So we continue to pursue that debt, and if he doesn't make payments, we're gonna be garnishing his wages on that one. This debt was a little bit different. This was a debt owed by his LLC. It was a debt money used to buy the equipment. And in negotiating with him, he actually wanted both debts forgiven in exchange for delivery of the equipment. And the proposal that's going to be in front of the board later on the agenda here is to accept the equipment in exchange for writing off that $10,000 debt. So
But the personal debt would still be
personal debt would still
pursuing.
be there, we'd still be pursuing that. So, and his first proposal of basically turning over the equipment and writing both debts off was rejected. So it's sort of a compromised position right now. But it can't go forward unless the board approves it, so.
What's the value of the property, of the equipment?
We had Tyler McDonald come in. He didn't do a formal appraisal of the equipment, but he said 6,000 to 8,000 maybe.
Okay, thank you.
So, I mean, I think that, some very good discussion there, and it is, so, the opportunity to take the equipment and hope we can get a fair price for it will not make us 100% whole, but it is, I think we do, if we take this approach today, I think we do need to make it clear that it isn't, we aren't giving up on the full 10,000. We are getting the equipment in exchange for that. Though we recognize the value may not make us 100% whole on that. So I think, we have to.
And just to clarify again, this loan is from the revolving loan fund, which are technically not our funds. So it was a grant that we applied for, received those funds, and we administer that loan fund. Example, him paying on the equipment, those are IDA funds because we purchased that equipment. So what we're what we're writing off today is the loan debt from the revolving loan fund. That when we loan out money, we, charge a 3 to 4% interest rate. As they pay it back, we essentially grow that loan fund.
So anything that so first of all, the process has been with our loan funds, we have a separate loan committee made up of a group outside of the board with, specialties in finance and other sectors that make a recommendation to our board. So generally, they meet, review these applications, make a recommendation to us for approval of that. So that's the process, and there is risk, right, involved in, these loans. Sometimes they're a little higher risk, but we do have those steps in place to try to vet the applications and minimize our risk. But in this case, we got it wrong
Right.
So the personal loan, where does that get reflected in the financials? Is that
So-
business dollars?
I think it's under the Bruce system. But I'm gonna have to look into that a little bit more. Because quite honestly, it should reflect that there is some back payments from Barketer under that Bruce system line. But it's not currently showing that, so I will look into that and talk to Cheyenne about that. And this situation has been very complicated from the start. We should have had, I don't even really want to get into it, but it's been very complicated from the very beginning.
The debt is a debt of the LLC to Barketer's LLC, which has no assets. The investors in the LLC have lost their investments. We have a secured interest in this equipment, and that's basically what gives us the first lien on the equipment. So that's our protection. There is no other assets there available to take or to pursue, really.
Mhm.
So how much was the original loan? You remember?
It was about 20,000.
20,000?
25
So
is,
do you have an offer on the
25,
equipment?
We do have interest, yeah, but again, it's like a lot of small, tiny parts.
So if you sell the equipment, will that money go back into the loan fund?
Yep.
So you're only gonna show the net loss and not the total write-off? Because there is quite a bit of scrutiny from a couple of legislators
Right,
on that loan fund, so I'm looking to minimize that number, the actual net loss for public presentation as much as you can.
I don't think we're gonna collect the full,
No, I realize that,
so,
but if you can
we need,
get 6,000 or 8,000
right,
and apply that to the loan fund so that your net loss only shows
exactly,
12 or
yes.
14, that's much better than a 25 number.
yeah, we're still owed 10 of that original, so he paid about 15 back.
Mhm.
Okay,
We're owed
so,
about 10, and we're looking at potentially getting 6 to 8 for the system, so we
Okay,
would
so-
be, it'd be a $2,000 to $4,000
yeah,
Loss.
loss on the,
yeah,
from the loan fund.
I don't think that would be a problem.
I would not be optimistic on the upper end of that sell, because anybody who buys it will know we're not in the brewing business. We're in a better position from a negotiations point of view.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
used and
As
it's
you,
5 years old at this
Yeah.
point.
No, that's a very fair point, for sure.
but it sounds like, Kevin, we have a greater likelihood with the personal loan.
Yes, yep, definitely.
Well, that's a confession of judgment that never goes away, right? So,
Right, it was all sort of contingent upon the board approving the first half here of forgiving this loan, and writing it off. And then basically, okay, now we can basically go forward with the confession of judgment part of it and pursue that.
And Larry, to that point, I mean, thinking going forward about our small business loan commit, or our small, what is it? The loan committee.
Mhm.
So there's one board member on there, and then it's all external members. So if there is, concern about that loan fund, and from the county standpoint, I mean, we can certainly share who's on that committee and even consider a county representative on that committee to review future applications.
that's a good thought.
Because again, I mean, it's up to us to approve that, but we generally take their we generally take the recommendation of the committee and follow the recommendation. In my time here, we've never rejected a positive recommendation from the committee.
Well,
So-
it's a high-risk business. Some of us get that and some of us don't. So,
And in the next couple of bullets on the agenda, we're implementing a process that involves the loan committee more than they've ever been involved. in rating and looking at the loans that they've essentially recommended in the past.
If there, to your point, if there is a lot of pushback, why, it would be nice to offer a critic position on that loan board, so it's a good thought.
Brittany, when we write off, we have to write off the full amount. When we write it off, and then recuperate, whatever we recuperate from the blue system will have to show up there at a different time
Right.
as reimbursement. But the write-off has to be assuming that we don't even sell it. Because we don't know what it'll sell for.
Yeah, the discussion can be, yes, we wrote off X,
Yeah.
but we're expecting to, you know,
There's
Right.
collateral.
money
Yeah.
to apply towards it from.
I think in like a couple of months cycle, as this is, like, I don't know when would this be presented to the legislature? Like, when would do they look at it on a monthly basis?
From time to time, the question comes up of how the microloan funds are doing.
Yeah.
It's kind of sporadic, it doesn't really follow any pattern.
Okay.
So, but, you know, as long as we can have a discussion that you had to legally write this thing off for X, but we expect to apply Y towards it, so that the net is only gonna be, you know, it becomes more palatable at that point.
All right, so we didn't actually have to approve the loan report, correct? That was just.
No, that's just for review.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
all right. Now, the next item, as Brittany alluded to, would be looking at updating a policy for our loan committee.
Yep, so I shared it with you on the screen here, and I sent a revised version last night. And this is, again, guidance from our auditor. We approved this loan collection and rating policy at our last meeting, but we needed to add in some other language. So originally, we just stated that this was for our revolving loan fund, but in all reality, it's for all of our long-term notes receivables. So any, our hand-in-hand payments and, if we purchase a piece of equipment and they're leasing it back, we rate all of those agreements. And then in section 3, the specific valuation reserve, the auditor, myself, and the loan committee met yesterday to implement a loan rating system that will be done at least annually with the loan committee. And essentially, we go through each of our notes receivables, we assign it with a risk rating of 1, 2, or 3, which is satisfactory. 1 is satisfactory, meaning they're up to date. 2 is watch, so, they might be falling a little bit behind. Maybe there's something in the industry that we need to focus on. So for example, if we have a loan with business that's based on our winters here, and they're falling a little bit behind, we take into account that our winters haven't been so great. And then 3, substandard, meaning that they have fallen pretty far behind. So we go through and we rate all of our notes receivables with 1, 2, or 3, and then we put a percentage against those loans, which essentially puts aside a reserve of what percentage we may expect to not collect by the end of the loan based on some of the criteria that we look at. So this is just the process that we are going to do with the loan committee on an annual basis. And I think, at least every 6 months internally, we will go through and kind of review our loans and where they're at with a more formal process. So we just need to approve these amendments to this policy.
Any questions here? Do we have a motion to approve the amended policy? Guidance, second. Jerry, discussion? All in favor? Motion carries, thank you.
Okay, and then this next document is our actual rating that we did yesterday with our auditor. So this is essentially an Excel sheet that, with a formula that helps to calculate, what's the principal balance for each of our notes receivables. Here's the rating, the percentage applied to it, and this is the reserve. So this is really telling us, so for example, Arbor Care, we rated them as 1 satisfactory with, we put the 5% percentage to that, which we expect to put away, reserve $645 that we may not see at the end of the loan. So basically, we're just defining risk on these loans in a formal process. I think in the past, the auditors, and we've become a lot more busy. We have a lot more notes receivables, a lot more loans than we ever really had. And so I think verbally, we would just kind of assign a percentage to these loans. But this is a more formal process that involves the loan committee on an annual basis to go through and really look at the status of all of these notes receivables that we have.
So when you say reserve, we have a balance sheet line that reflects cash somewhere
Yes,
that
so
would be transferred in the event that these funds are not available. Is that, because that's what, I mean, in
it's,
my operation, a reserve means there's money somewhere.
this is essentially on the financial statements, and God, and please, if I'm stating this incorrectly, on our financial statements, there will be a line that states, based on what we rated, there will be a line that states that this is the amount that we expect to maybe not collect by the end of that loan.
So essentially, this is us just being prudent, assuming that there's a default rate for all these loans. The default rate starts off at, we've decided 5% for the best loan. There's a 5% default rate. But what does that mean? We have to quantify that 5% into a dollar amount based on the amount of the loan. And then that all adds up to that number on the bottom right, and that gets reflected as money we may lose.
So,
So it's not a reserve.
yeah, I was gonna say, so reserve's not necessarily.
No, I didn't come up with that.
No, that's fine, I'm
But
just
yeah,
wondering.
no,
It's
it's,
not-
yeah, it's money that we may lose, and it's supposedly looked at on an annual basis, which there was suggestion to look at it more often due to the businesses being some of them seasonal, which we probably will do. But yeah, it's not a reserve, it's a maybe loss.
So,
However that's reflected, I don't know how that's reflected in our balance sheet.
so really, the R word is risk.
That's correct,
Yes.
that's correct.
Yes.
You're trying to project risk, money that won't be repaid.
Yes,
It may not be repaid,
may
right?
not be repaid.
May not.
And it's kind of it doesn't make sense to attribute a default rate of 5% to the best loan. Well, you could say that, hey, there's a 5% probability you won't collect this, but to turn that then into a dollar amount is an absolutely silly exercise in my mind, but it needs to happen from an audit standpoint in order to quantify the risk we're taking as an IDA in that loan. So hence, it is, from my point of view, it's completely useless. Because it's probably never gonna be realized or be accurate in any capacity.
Mhm.
But it has to be done, so that there it is. So we have an idea of, hey, this is, well, essentially, so in this case, you could say, all right, here's the maximum amount of money we think we may lose. And that's a decent number to have as an idea, but is it accurate? Probably never gonna be close to it.
So do you show it as a liability or?
I don't know that. I don't know how that's shown on our balance side. I
Yeah.
just went through this process yesterday on the call with the auditor.
It's just a number.
She's gonna have to walk us through that, walk me through where it's located on our financial.
Yeah, and I don't know
statements.
that either, because I'd probably be involved.
This
in
is
that.
a new process. This whole chart, a local development corporation in a neighboring county uses the same exact rating system. And this was just, it was recommended by our auditor that this is something that we need to do instead of just throwing numbers in the air. Oh, we may not collect this amount for this loan. This is that formal process that we're putting in place. It took us 2 meetings to understand it because, you know, in my mind, in Guy's mind, it was kind of backwards. You know, we want to look at it as, okay, we expect to collect 95% of that loan instead of looking at it backwards.
I think if you just scroll up a little bit, I mean, risk is in the type, review risk rating. So I think that's, you know, to Jerry's point, reserve seems, because we're not actually setting aside that money somewhere.
Right.
So that word does seem out of place, but the title of review risk rating seems appropriate to.
Right, so I just think risk
Yeah.
is the right word.
Mhm.
So let's take a what if, Arbor Care
Mhm.
is rated at 1.
Mhm.
If in this fiscal year, they made their payments in a timely way,
Mhm.
everything, you know, was up to snuff, then what would happen? Would their rating be 0 and then no risk assigned?
No, there's no
It would
zero,
still be
Jerry.
1.
The fact that they're coming to an IDA for a loan inherently has a risk because the financial institution is not going to take them on. So they automatically are, the probability of them paying is 80%, right, to start with, right? So if we assume that, nobody's ever gonna go to 0. 1 is, if they are current and everything's perfect, there's still 1 where there's a 5% probability of default. And then it goes on further from that.
So it's sort of like a GASB number with respect to pension and health insurance covered.
That's right, yeah.
And-
The auditor parts of they need to have a dollar amount associated with the amount of risk our
Right.
organization's taking. This is a somewhat sensible way to give it to them. How reliable it is remains to be seen, but somebody needs this number somewhere. And we have
Yeah.
now a mechanism to give it to them. And it's not bad for us to also be able to look at it and say, all right, the most we could probably lose is 50 grand, but again, it's just how do you do that?
Mhm.
You know, we just,
And these percentages can change.
yes.
Well, we're told, like, so if we go through another shutdown, for
Yeah.
example, we can change those percentages because the economy is poor and we really don't think we're gonna collect on these funds.
And those are off the principal balance, right, not the original loan amount? That 5% is off of the principal,
Yeah.
Yes.
so as principal goes down, the
They
risk.
should go down.
It
Yeah.
always goes down.
Yes.
But I will ask about if we can change that reserve word to
Well, in
risk, if that makes
accounting,
sense.
reserve has a very defined
Yeah, right.
definition.
It's money set aside.
Right, and we're not doing that now. If we did that so that we could replenish the loan fund, then reserve would be appropriate.
Mhm.
So just something to consider.
That's a good point. So we
Good
do,
discussion.
yeah, this was a very confusing process. But we do have to approve these ratings for the auditor.
It could be a useful number if, you know, to apply against making you, you know, if you got a lot of assets and no liabilities, if you were short on the balance sheet, it brings, you know, might make you look a little less cash rich. On the other hand, it may bite you.
All right, so with that, we need to, as Brittany said, approve this sheet as it stands. If we're comfortable with the ratings given to each of these loans, that we would approve this for this year's audit process.
I would bring forward the motion, however, the word reserve is not appropriate, so I think I would offer a motion to approve, but change the word reserve to risk. Okay.
Okay, Jerry made a
I'll
motion.
second
Tom, second. All in favor? Or sorry, any discussion?
I just want to commend the team and And I guess you were hopeful in this process as a group.
I hope that
Because I think, earlier we had a conversation about writing off a loan and all of that activity. Just maybe this would have helped with some red flags earlier in a process to the group that came before us. So I just think from a governance and oversight point of view, this is really a step in a very positive direction. So I just want to commend everyone for this work.
Yeah, over time, you would have seen Barketer loans slide from a 1 rating to a 2.
Yeah.
Rating, and there's red flags that get going off.
Right. Yep.
Alright, thank you for that. Okay, now, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion carries. Okay. So now that brings us back to the bar feeders, debt and, again, the request from the auditor to write off, the portion from the revolving loan fund is listed in our packet as $10,437.
That's updated.
That's
We have to
updated.
write off the principal amount, which is $9,908.
$908. Okay, so that included back interest and
No, but I asked the auditor,
I'm saying we only have to write off the principal and
Right.
this number included. Okay. All right, so it would be writing off the principal from the revolving loan fund. Oh, sorry, you have it up there.
Yep.
The updated number, okay. And then, and again, we'll continue to work with Kevin on, the bill of sale on acquiring the equipment as a.
It's all ready to go, depending on today's approval.
Okay.
So the motion should incorporate that next step, correct? That we approve writing it off and then authorizing you to do whatever it is you will do so that we gain control of the asset.
Yes, so it's actually reciprocal, so yeah. So the motion should authorize both.
So could you suggest the language for the motion so that we capture it accurately?
Yeah, sure. So what would be obviously writing off the $9,900 in conjunction with the board receiving the bill of sale for the equipment that secures the loan.
That is the motion.
So are you,
Words matter,
are
right?
you accepting?
And I bring forward that motion.
That motion I'll second.
Ron, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion carries. Thank you.
Not as part of the motion, however, you will continue to work then, after that is set aside, working on pursuing the personal loan and that sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. I'm just, what makes me uncomfortable, hesitant is that we're being recorded and it's gonna be on there and I guess it's gonna be on the website. So this probably could have been an executive session thing, but I will follow through with that, yes. And already, we do have a signed confession of judgment, so we're ready to proceed with that.
Okay.
Okay, the next item would be general services agreement proposal.
All right, so I provided you guys with a general services agreement with Camoin Associates. They are an economic development consulting firm out of Albany. I've come to know them pretty well, and one of their directors, she's from Sandy Creek and grew up on southern Tug Hill, so anytime she gets a chance to work in Lewis County on Tug Hill, she jumps at the opportunity. So essentially, I reached out to them last month in regard to the Lionsdale property and assisting us with an RFP process or a request for interest process. And I asked them if there's some sort of general services agreement that we could potentially enter into that doesn't bind us to using them for services. So if we don't use them, it's no skin off our back. But if we do use them, then, the number of hours and the cost is kind of agreed upon, and we don't have to enter into separate contracts for things that we need to use them for. So I asked them to assist us with the RFP process, potentially for the line sale site. And I'm also thinking of a couple of other property development projects that will be coming up in the future. So for example, the Lions Falls Mill site, could that be our part to assist with some, putting out an RFP for portions of that property, or creating visuals for, community input sessions. How could we recreate that waterfront? They can help us with all of that stuff. Next year, the South Lewis School, so Glenfield School and Port Lydon School, and even Lions Falls School. I don't know where we're at with that school, but these are going to be empty, vacant schools, and we need to start to market them. Again, could we use Camoin to kind of help us, put out a call to the developers on their list, the contacts on their list to assist us. So there's some property development projects that are going to be up and coming. And, we're a 3-staff organization. I would say, working with developers and going through that RFP process we're not experts in that right now, but if we could use Camoin to maybe assist us, for the first time through, then we have a template so that we can then do it on our own in the future. I think it would be a good learning experience for us. So some of the things that they can assist us with: real estate development processes, market analysis, strategy, lead generation, positioning of properties, the development of RFP documents, the advertising and the vetting of RFP documents, and advisement and negotiation with developers. So again, these are, very tedious items that if we want to really move some of these properties in the future, I think we're just going to need some assistance of some outside experts.
And I'd like to make 2 comments. One, Lewis County does have a history with Camoin. They have been engaged in other projects before.
In the brownfield.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but to my knowledge, fairly satisfactorily. And secondly, one thing Brittany and I talked about, because this winter when we were really trying to think about the future of our organization and the turnover in staff, we talked about really, getting back up to 3, and we're grateful to have Janet here. And then maybe within 12 to 18 months, adding a 4th person. And one thing Brittany and I started talking about with this sort of process is, if we're going to invest a certain amount of money a year into additional labor, do we do that as a 4th person who may be very talented in one area but not, have their own limitations? Or do we take that money instead of investing in a 4th person immediately and kind of budget that towards professional services, where we hire specialists for defined projects? To me, that doesn't close the door on building our staff in the future, but in the short term, are we better off budgeting that money for professional services that are more targeted than building our staff? And so I just wanted to put that out there to frame this process, because obviously we have a limited budget and we have to think about where it's best used. And this sort of agreement would eliminate the step of formalizing an agreement for every single request we made to this group. But as Brittany said, to me, I think the budget would be just a larger budget for professional services in general that may include other specialties beyond what they could offer as different projects arise.
And at this point, if we were to use them, this would come out of just our projects budget. And again, Shai and I will be doing a deep dive in our budget in October. And we're gonna be revamping some things and really focusing on, some professional services. And essentially, to me, this is building our toolbox. We can't be experts in everything, so this will help.
I agree with that. I just want to speak to what Joe said. I think it would be really important for you to also be developing some sort of inner policies or procedures where you are not just necessarily outsourcing to those experts, but also building capacity and drawing from that experience to develop your own internally.
Yep.
Because, just to do, I completely agree, we can't be experts in everything, but we can leverage the experts to build our own capacity in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this is obviously a broader discussion of, than the more narrow question of, do we want to authorize moving forward with this specific general services agreement? But I think the bigger picture discussion is important as we think about these sort of options for pursuing our goals. So is there an excellent comments, Darlene? Is there any other questions or comments related to the concept in general?
I think at our finance committee, we mentioned utilizing them for an RFP or the REI process for a line sale potentially, to start, see how it goes. And then we'll go from there.
Just out of curiosity, is this based on our hourly time involved, or do you have my retainer? Or?
It's an hour.
It's an hourly, so
And
we
it's-
agree to, what the cost would be for a specific item that we're asking them to help
And
us with.
it's spelled out at the end of the agreement, where if you scroll down a few.
Yeah, I
pages.
saw that, but I
Yeah,
didn't know if there was a retainer.
No, there's no retainer fee, and this is just agreeing to those rates if we do engage their services.
They did a nice job when they worked with Lions Falls on the BOA, so I would expect
Yeah.
good results from the relationship.
So the general services agreement I endorse, and I think it's a thoughtful way to move forward. Then it's project specific.
Mhm.
That, will there be sort of a scope of work outlined for the
Yes.
specific project?
Yeah.
that Then you would execute with them so that there's clarity on
Yep,
the
absolutely.
assignment.
Yep, absolutely. I think that's the beauty of it. It's very specific, but yeah, very flexible in how we utilize them.
So what do we have, a motion to authorize moving forward with this general service? Darlene, second?
Sure.
Got it. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, moving on to Lionsdale, which just as a refresher, Lionsdale is the vacant wood chip cogeneration property, not the Lions Falls mill site.
Yep. So when it comes to this site, and I engaged with Kevin on a sample RFP that was done for a vacant manufacturing site in Erie County near Buffalo. And we need to make a formal approval to go through the RFP process for the property. And again, this is where some expertise comes in. We don't necessarily have to sell the property. I think this is where they can help us to figure out the creative solutions for businesses. So could it be a lease to own? Could it be just a straight lease? Could they buy it? Here are the creative incentive packages that we could put with the property. So there's a lot of different options out there. Do we do that formal RFP or just kind of a request for interest? That's where Camoin will help us. But I think, in regard to our property disposal policy, we should enter into an RFP process to put it out to bid. So this is this goes with our property disposal policy, and I think this is just the next step that we should take, along with trying to figure out the assessment. So I would like to just get this motion out of the way so that we can start to work on this process.
Any questions there?
I go ahead and
Tom,
make a motion.
make this motion. Second, Darlene, any discussion? All in favor?
So, I guess,
Oh, sorry.
So just to be clear, so the general services agreement now will dovetail to a specific project,
Yes,
and that's the specific project.
yes.
Okay.
To start.
And is, I'm still learning my way around the county, is Lionsdale and Lyons Falls kind of near each other?
It's the town of Lionsdale and the village of Lyons Falls, and I think Lyons Falls is split into the town of Lionsdale and the town of
Western.
West Turn.
But this is outside the village line.
Yeah.
This is like
By 3 or 4 miles.
miles.
It's kind of in the
Up a
woods.
hill.
Woods,
It's
yeah.
nowhere.
3 or 4 miles up the Moose River from Lyons.
There are just some questions that should not be asked. All right, thank you. Okay, thank you.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you. All right,
Just as a side note, whatever happened with the substation that's on the other side of the road, did you get clarity on that? Who owns that? Do you own that?
No, the property is owned by Twin Rivers. The substation is still owned by Re-Energy. When we acquired the property and back last year when Tim and Eric were working on it, we didn't want to acquire the substation because of liability and it needs some work. So we're working on, there's a solar developer who's interested in a neighboring property who wants to connect into that substation. So we've been facilitating conversations to kind of make that happen. There's an old easement that's many years old that needs to be updated. We would need to have a discussion, probably in our committee meeting, you know, our specific move forward with that substation. Do we really want to own it, or can we assign it to a developer? I'm not an expert in substations, so we need to consult on that.
I will just say, just add a couple sentences to the history there, was that when the negotiations were ongoing with Re-Energy to basically turn the property over to us, they did offer to turn the substation over to us too. However, as Brittany's talked about, there is this very complicated, actually series of easements or history of easements between, it was Burroughs at the time and where Re-Energy's predecessor was. And it basically puts a lot of responsibility on the owner of the substation to clean the property up, and also required Burroughs, now Twin Rivers, approval before any transfer could be done. And Twin Rivers was basically uncommunicative. They never talked to us. They just would not communicate with us at all. And so in order to make the transaction go forward for the land, we just said, you guys, and Bill Ralston from Re-Energy basically agreed, we'll just keep the substation for now. If you have a reason for it in the future, we'll turn it over to you, or turn it over to whoever. They don't, it's not worth anything to them, but it would just make the deal a lot simpler just to get the land back into our name and worry about the substation down the road.
Thank you.
Those have been fun conversations.
But that is the majority of the value of that property, is that substation. So back to your assessment challenge.
yeah, good point.
That's a good point.
All right, so now, the office space downtown that we need to be in by October.
Yep, this is another fun project. All right, so we have engaged with a number of contractors who are very, very, very busy at this point. So I've provided you all with a scope of work of us thinking about how can we recreate what we were starting to create here in this building in that downtown location. So I've put together just the bare minimum construction and renovation and improvements that we would need in that building. Mind you, the Interior Outfitters building has not been updated in about 30 years. So the carpet is the original. There's pegboard on the walls that needs to come down. So we thought about what is the very bare minimum that we need to recreate it, make it look nice and inviting and be useful. So in the Interior Outfitter side, we need to strip the outer walls of pegboard, put up new sheetrock, and we're thinking about creating 5 new offices, essentially creating a wall with just, they won't come up all the way to the ceiling because the ceiling is very high, with doors on each, so about 12-foot office spaces. Vinyl plank flooring in the entryway, and there's 2 big stage windows where he used to display furniture. New carpeting throughout that building, and the vision for that side would be for offices, a small private meeting room, the shared workspace, the co-working space, and the incubator type atmosphere. I'm assuming, Shai and I would share an office in that side, leaving the other offices as revenue generators. Jenna, I envision as like the person in the front of the building, as when people walk in, she greets people, points them in the right direction for that co-working space. The TJ's Barbecue side, the front portion, all we need to do is prime and paint the walls. And the vision for that section is the main entrance for the Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development. So think of a welcome center or resource center. If people are coming in to meet with me or Shai or Jenna or Kristen from the chamber, they come to that location. And then the back portion of the TJ side, which used to be the kitchen, we would again frame and put new sheetrock, electrical outlets throughout, carpet, a drop ceiling, a small kitchenette, and this would be a multi-purpose room. So essentially what this room is, conference room, put the TV up on the wall, meeting room, overflow, whatever we essentially need it to be. So we're also working with Dank. They're able to extend the fiber line for us, so we'll have the same technology that we have here. We reached out to 7 contractors, and 3 came to look at it. 2 said they would provide bids. 1 backed out. So we have 1 bid for sheetrock and paint. Essentially 2 bids for paint if you include the first contractor. And then I'm waiting on a 3rd bid for flooring. So if we look up at the budget, or what we've kind of figured out based on what the estimates we received. So this is what we're looking at. I think at most about roughly between 30 and 35. I guess it really depends on what type of carpet we put in. If we want to do all 5 offices, maybe we only start with 3. So that is the bare minimum to make it look presentable, to make it look useful, and to recreate what we're trying to create here, to bring in revenue. So I put together, some of our expenses and revenue. So if we look at our rent price per year, utilities, very rough estimate based on, National Grid average and NYSEG and internet. If we look at, I think at most 35, I don't think it'll be that much if we kind of tweak some things. And if we're looking at where do we want to get this money from, where do we want to spend, what money do we want to spend on for this? If we just received our $135,000 grant for the purchase of this building, We flipped this building, made it into a productive building. Offices are beautiful. Let's take that money and put it back into, putting our fingerprint on these downtown buildings and making them places that people want to walk into and use and just start that revitalization process for Shady Ave. If we look at, and again, these are what the chamber's paying now, what the journal's paying now. We have 2 resident coworkers here that are paying $75 a month. Again, based on the space, we don't have those prices nailed down yet, but if we aim for 10 coworkers at $75 a month in the first year, and then 15 in the next, 20 in the next, by year 3, we could actually be making about $4,500. So what we're not accounting for is any event space income, meeting room rentals, various levels of co-working space income, the exact fees for the tenants that we have. So these are rough estimates, but these renovation costs are approximate, depending on what we want to do.
So this is a discussion.
Yes.
So this is gonna be an interesting test for you and the board. This is the kind of thing where you have a plan, you have an idea of how to take our future home and make it professional, and also work within some of our identified goals, right? This information you're giving us is interesting and helpful, and really what motivates the renovation costs is what you're seeing for bids. So a reflection of current market.
Right.
That's good. I would suggest that you bring it forward as a single proposal, and I don't think it's a good practice to say, well, we can, I don't know if I would use the word approximate cost. It's what you know right now,
Yeah.
so don't sell yourself short on that. And on the rooms, I'm a firm believer in a business setting, you address the space that you need to drive your operations.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you're gonna live in construction for 3 years,
Mhm.
and that will negatively impact your throughput. So, we're investing in this building, and if this building is going to create some of the same opportunities this space has, we sort of have to get off the dime and get it done.
Yep.
And I think you've brought forward a very thoughtful, reasonable proposal. I don't think you allow us to get into the minutia of your plans. I think you bring forward a reasonable plan. Now, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head, but I know at the health system, when we were working off estimates, there are a number of ways to do it. But there are calculators online where you can, for the type of business use and renovation costs, you can actually build a report that will let you see if your estimates are in alignment. The only downside to those is it doesn't adjust to market changes. So as you know, because the media has reported, 2x4s are in short supply. So the price of a 2x4 has jumped up. Well, you probably know firsthand in your day job. So these calculators wouldn't take those unique market, local market influences.
Right.
So your request of us is to basically become the general contractor of the space that we need to occupy October 1st. You're projecting a budget of around $35,000, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you're giving us additional information on how you would move forward. So it's a single ask, and you don't want us to start nitpicking your budget.
Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
So I think this is reasonable. It is now the beginning of August. And if you're gonna line up these contractors to come in and move this, are you comfortable, you and your team, being the general on this?
Yep, I'm gonna have to be.
Right, because that is not necessarily easy, right? When this work is being done, the various governmental entities will have to, pass or approve, occupancy and making sure codes are addressed. And, because I suspect there are some codes that we have today that probably would suggest the building is not completely to code.
Right.
Since now we're changing,
Right.
right?
Yep, especially, things like electrical and whatnot. so-
Fire suppression,
Yeah.
HVAC, those kinds of things.
Well, yeah, and I would say that these are very minor renovations, so, we're not changing anything structurally.
Yeah, I think we probably should check into that because
Yeah.
of just the change in use. The change,
Right.
the change in use will trigger some of that stuff, so.
So you may want to add a contingency line. So as you build the budget, right now, because there are some unknowns, you may want to think about a 20% contingency.
Very good input, for sure. So with that said, I think that's a good approach and, the breakdown is very helpful, but to Jerry's point, if we look at, moving forward with this, with the idea that current bids give us a cost of just over 34,000, and we would add a 20% contingency on that. And recognizing that there is some grant resources to help cover those costs. Is there any other questions or comments?
I don't know who the codes officer for Lowell is, but probably we ought to be talking to whoever it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, for sure.
It's us, Brittany. The county does.
Oh, it is, okay. I'll call Tim.
No sweat.
Just slide this right.
Oh, that's right too, yeah, sorry.
All right, so in the respect out of time, I mean, this is all very good input, but if we, and I don't wanna cut anyone short if there's any other questions, but we're ready to move forward. I think if we, someone wanna propose this, with the 20% contingency added into what Brittany, outlined here.
Yeah, bring it forward.
Jerry, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Thank you. Motion carries. All right, last item, and I don't know if we should have, well, it's agreed upon. I don't know if we need
agreed
it,
upon it in an
if we need
email.
any sort of executive session for this or not. I mean, it is a discussion on employee personnel, so we should probably,
We can leave that to the end, executive session.
all right. All right, so the last thing are just a few updates, and kind of, as Brittany said, a call to action and a few items that we can be working on.
So we do have a board member opening. I've reached out to Nick Lehman to kind of gauge if he had anyone in mind that has a development or financial, business development type background, engineering. If we look at the board members that we've lost, Tina and Jared both had that development background and financial background. But we're also thinking about where are people located that are on our board, where do they live? So town of Diana, town of Krogan, we are not represented. So I am asking board members, whoever would be interested to kind of help recruit, to get resumes into the county and go through that interview process to fill that board seat.
So just a reminder is that the county board makes the decision of appointing the person and goes through an interview process, but, you know, it's certainly, we want the best qualified candidates, so helping publicize the opening with, again, you know, I mean, there's tons of skill sets that could be valuable to us, but we do recognize that Jared and Tina had a skill set in economic development and construction that we're now lacking. And again, you know, we try to think of the board as being representative of the entire county and try to have that diversity. So those two things are on our mind, but ultimately it's the county's decision through the interview process who gets appointed.
So would anyone be interested in taking that on to assist with the board member recruitment and search process?
I've reached out to a couple of people, Tim Regan for one, I think he's
He
a
used to-
past
He
member
used to be on
anyway.
our board, yeah.
And we can get into more details. I think it's just that at this point, again, kind of the theme of this is just to look for, you know, an awareness and a willingness for folks to be thinking about this and contributing.
Yeah.
And is it up on the website yet or no?
Mm-mm.
So it will be up on our website, almost like a job posting. There's no money involved. It's a volunteer position, but you know, so we will have that up on the website to direct people to send their resumes to the county on it. But
So I'll send the contacts that I have. I'll just start with you and maybe Goggin as vice chair, just to get those names out there. And the last item, our countywide solar process update. So as Larry mentioned before, we have been meeting with the county. We've had 2 meetings to discuss this solar tsunami that's happening in Lewis County. So I have a governance committee meeting planned for August 12th, and hopefully the governance committee at least can be in attendance, and anyone else on the board who wants to be there. We're looking at this process as Ryan calls it, a 2-pronged approach. So our role in solar will be to incentivize the use of marginal land versus prime ag land. And we need to figure out the mechanism to do that and what is that incentive. And then also from the planning side, encouraging municipalities to pass solar laws at the local level to ensure that they're also thinking about, the types of land that solar likes to develop on. So we have pretty much all parties involved, including real property, soil and water, us, county planning, our attorneys. It's a very comprehensive process. We plan to put out a packet and have a webpage on our website with all the information so that each solar project has the same process. And we're all aware of when solar developers are coming into town, because oftentimes we don't know until the very last step.
and
When
Brittany
they've already developed on, or looking to develop on prime ag land.
and Brittany and Cassandra Buell from the planning department are planning to engage once we have a completed packet in the next, hopefully 6 weeks to 2 months, engage with the townships on what's in that packet. But I think the ask here is that as we move forward and hammer this out in the committee meeting and hopefully have a policy to approve at our September board meeting, that we educate ourselves on that and be available to talk to appointed officials in the townships that we live in to help understand that process in addition to the work that Brittany and Cassandra will be doing. And so that it's just kind of an awareness piece at this point that this is been a pretty heavy process, with, as Brittany mentioned, a lot of parties involved, and we're very excited about where this is gonna lead us and being, kind of cutting edge on land use development and, how we can influence that in a positive way in the county, but, it's also gonna, require a lot of education, so. All right, so,
Sorry, Larry, you mentioned, I think at the beginning of the meeting, that the county's gonna be approving a policy in favor of protecting prime ag land, is that right? Or is that what you said? Or does that tie into what Cassandra was saying at that meeting, as far as the county planning board review? Is there gonna be a policy that the county planning board considers?
It's complicated, there's a lot of tangents, so to speak. We're trying to bring the whole thing together so that there's a packet available for developers, that this is how the process works in Lewis County.
so the planning, oh, sorry, go ahead.
The first step was your UTEP that you're gonna discuss and hopefully pass at your September meeting.
It'll be draft as September.
It'll be draft.
Because we have to
Because we have
get,
to send it
we
out
have to send it to the municipalities for input,
We're hoping October.
Okay,
so we do
It'll
a
be final in
resolution in
October.
September to
so
send.
Ryan and I's thought that we would get a supporting resolution from the Board of Legislators at our September meeting. But we're gonna be off schedule on that, so we'll have to back it up to October.
Well, there'll be opportunity for, if we pass the draft at our September meeting, it then goes to all municipalities for input before we officially adopt it. So I would think the county, it would still be a time at the county's board meeting to have the draft in front of them and make a motion to support it, just like any other township or anyone else would.
All right.
It would also be helpful to include right in the UTEP, in something like in accordance with the county's policy, favoring preservation of quality, or whatever language you were using, agricultural land. I think it would be helpful to include a reference to that within the UTEP itself.
Yeah, the only problem there is we haven't developed the policy. We don't have the buy-in from the legislators in order to do that. We're trying to work towards that goal.
Okay.
So this gets back to, and we're really excited about this process because one of the biggest concern is landowner rights. And we're really optimistic that this two-pronged approach that Brittany mentioned, where there will be guidance from the planning department on potential policies that townships can adopt, and incentives within our UTEP to use marginal land that do not, for lack of a better term, zone these out of existence, do not take away the landowner's rights, but provide mechanisms to incentivize smart land use and development. So that's what we're really going for here. So, all right. So we're recognition of time. We do have one last item that we wanted to go to an executive session for, so people can understand we need to leave. But if we can stay for a very quick executive session regarding personnel and salaries, then we would take a motion to.
So moved.
Jerry moves a second.
One second.
Darlene, all in favor? All right. So we'll move into executive session. Is it?
I don't know as we.
Yeah, you
No,
guys
you
can.
guys.
Okay, now we're back in, and, so with that, that was the last item on the agenda for today, so we can take a motion to end the board meeting. Ron,
Second.
Darlene, all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Good to see everyone.